Hello everyone, Nick here from the Sage Scrolls, and today we're looking at a two-parter. This will be part 1 of 2. Part 2 should be linked in the description once it's up, and you can go watch that after this one. For part 1, this is about a GM who takes legal action because of a player walkout. Without any further ado, let's get into it. This post is entitled "The Time a GM Became So Enraged at a Player Walkout That She Took Legal Action Against Us for It", part 1 of 2, posted by user/shoeowner. I'm going to split this into 2 parts because it's frankly too lengthy a story to make for a single post, even with a TLDR. This was years and years ago, when LiveJournal was a relevant thing and RP communities were fairly commonplace on that platform. Not the typical sort of role-playing game that frequently gets discussed in the subreddit, but a play-by-post game which required fairly minimal GM involvement. The game in question was one of those big pan-fandom games that you'll sometimes see, with players taking on roles of characters from books, movies, comics, games and such, and throwing them together into a single setting. Not my usual sort of game, either then or now, but the premise seemed interesting to me. Characters duped into taking a trip with promises of their fondest wishes being granted, only to find themselves trapped in a desolate and inescapable British castle and its surrounding estate, and investigating the mystery of what brought them together from their desperate worlds and how to escape whilst interacting with these extreme and outlandish people from other realities. Fertile ground for some interesting role-playing premises. At the time I joined the game, little did I realize it had just undergone something of a collapse in its player base. Many of the long-time players had left after a huge personal conflict with the GM, whom, for reasons which will become clear later, I will call Camel. I was never 100% clear on the details of this falling out, but in retrospect, nothing about it surprises me. Suffice it to say that Camel was a difficult person to get along with, and a large number of players had collectively decided they were done with her bullcrap. Nevertheless, I found myself greatly enjoying playing with the other players in the group who remained active, and became deeply invested in the game. However, over the course of these first several months, Camel gradually went completely silent, not responding to any messages and essentially abandoning the game. By the nature of the game, this wasn't necessarily a death sentence. The players were free to continue to roleplay among themselves. It just meant that no new plot elements would be introduced for us to interact with. In this time, I started both regularly playing and talking with a player whom I'll call Chihuahua. Our talk became increasingly flirtatious and eventually romantic, and in our talks, she revealed a bunch of stuff to me that shed some light on all of this. She and Camel were roommates, and apparently Camel had just grown so dissolute over the departure of all the players that she gradually cared about in the game, and she no longer felt any investment in it. I suggested to her that perhaps she could ask her roommate if the two of us could be given sort of co-GM authority to just kind of move things along and keep the game running. She agreed and secured this permission, and we managed to get things moving again. Over the course of the next few months, we managed to recruit a whole bunch of new players and get numerous new plots going. Camel was completely checked out. Chihuahua and I agreed that what would be best for the game would be if she were to formally resign and hand it over to the two of us, but that just due to her ego, it was unlikely she would ever do so. Eventually, I made a trip to see Chihuahua in person, down in the southern US, for a 2-week vacation. I won't go into personal details of that visit, but there are some details which germane to the game and by extension this story. The two of them, and a third roommate who plays no relevant role in the story, lived in this bizarre little hovel way out in the middle of the desert. Filthy in ways which are hard to encapsulate, the most memorable detail was the washroom mirror. Imagine if every time you brushed your teeth, you then spat out the frothy mix of saliva and toothpaste directly onto the mirror itself, and then just never cleaned it, and nor did your roommates. It just became this sedimentary formation of dried toothpaste spit piled upon itself, obscuring your reflection. Then extend this level of squalor to every other aspect of the home, and you should be able to form a coherent mental image of the place. This squalor is made even stranger for the fact that in addition to like 5 dogs, and a pair of small dogs of some Mexican breed which Chihuahua also had, the name of which I can't now recall, Camel owned a lot of exotic pets, some of which I believe are illegal to own in the US. Among them were an emu, the most vile of all birds, and a pair of camels. Apparently she was from some old money family and just received this hefty monthly allowance, which she spent almost exclusively on these exotic animals and basically nothing at all on home upkeep. Eventually, she'd basically just never worked a day in her life, and this was just her thing. In the first several days that I was there, she never once made herself seen or known, just keeping to her bedroom 100% of the time. It wasn't until about a week into the trip, during a night when we went into the city for dinner, that she joined us for the outing and I got to meet her. All things considered, it was a surprisingly cordial meeting, and we actually had some pretty fruitful and productive discussions about things which could be done with the game, which left me feeling pretty invigorated about the whole matter. By the time I went home, it was clear that the romantic aspect of my relationship with Chihuahua wasn't going to work out. Sometimes what works online doesn't necessarily translate into IRL chemistry. It happens. Again, no need to go into details, but we ended things on what seemed, at the time, like amiable terms. Immediately upon my return home, we kicked off a big meta-plot development in the game involving every player and splitting off into 3 big threads, which would propel the game's long, stagnant plot forward in a bunch of exciting new ways. Chihuahua insisted on having one character in each of these threads, which she'd be writing in order to keep things moving along. This would soon prove to be rather ironic. She quickly lost interest in all of them and went silent, even with the gentle prodding by the various players. She could not be coaxed into any participation in any of them for weeks, and then months. Other things were happening in the game in the meantime. I was using my assistant GM status to give the players plenty to play with, to keep things bouncing along and interesting. As Chihuahua disappeared entirely from the game as Camel had before her, I maintained the game's public chat room, keeping the community engaged and social, moving things along as best as I could. There was considerable sourness among the players towards Camel and Chihuahua, who were seen as holding back the game's progress and the ability of the other players to get anywhere with the main plot of the game, but we were all still having fun one with another. By this time, there were dozens of players in the game, most of whom had never had any interactions with Camel at all, and only knew Chihuahua as that other co-GM who never does anything and is holding everything up. So imagine everyone's surprise when after the better part of a year of silence, Camel puts out an admin post notifying everyone that I was being stripped of my position and authority and that she was resuming full control of the game, without having had any communication with me about it ahead of time. Now, I don't know about you, but talking to someone online and then going out to see them in real life sounds a bit iffy and scary to me. I'm glad it didn't turn out worse, but typically those aren't going to be the best encounters. I don't know, someone else could prove me wrong, but I think I don't think you should have just gone out to see them. However, it seems like everything went all right there. Didn't end on the best note. This one, I don't know if there's too much I'd say to do better. It's a little strange, though, definitely, that after a year of silence, Camel finally returns to their GMing position and tells everyone that you have been stripped, that you're no longer part of this, and especially for new players that haven't seen her before, it could cause some tumultuous stuff, but she was the rightful owner of the game, and if she sorted stuff out that was causing her to take leave from the game and she got her life back on track, she should resume, though because this is only part 1, I assume things get worse from here. In the end, yeah, I guess she's in the wrong. If it's been a whole year, it's kind of now your game. We'll see, though, in part 2, so if you guys are interested, it'll be up soon. I'll have a link to it in the description, and if you like my content, like what I do here, be sure to subscribe. I'm Nick from the Sage Scrolls, I'll see you all in the next video.